I was distractedly washing the dishes when my phone vibrated on the counter. I didn't think much of it until I saw the name on the screen. My daughter, Emily. The text was short, but it hit me like a punch. Come now. I'm scared. My heart raced, and I felt the air leave my lungs. For a second, I stood still, trying to process what I had just read. The kitchen seemed to spin around me, and the sound of the faucet running became a distant rumble. My hands trembled as I unlocked my phone to call her back, but she didn't answer. Each unanswered ring was like a blade cutting through my calm. Fear turned into a suffocating weight in my chest. It was at that moment that I realized it didn't matter why. I had to get there. I threw my rubber gloves on the floor, grabbed my bag, and almost stumbled out. The distance to my parents' house had never seemed so long in my mind. Every second felt like an eternity. I called my mom as I ran to the car, but she didn't answer either. This only increased the panic burning inside me. The questions came like a flood. What happened? Why is she scared? Where is everyone? It was as if the entire universe was pushing me toward that moment. My fingers were so tense they could barely turn the ignition key. The engine finally roared to life, but my breath was held. All I could think about was my daughter's face, the frightened look she might be giving me at that moment. The road to my parents' house had never seemed so menacing. Share this story to reach further. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video on WhatsApp. And leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. The sky was heavy, covered in clouds that seemed to descend upon the city, as if the weather itself sensed what was about to happen. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, and each red light felt like a cruel provocation. With every kilometer, my mind painted increasingly worse scenarios. The sound of the engine was drowned out by the pounding of my heart in my ears. I glanced at my phone on the seat next to me, waiting for Emily to call me back, but nothing. The lack of response was like a silent scream only I could hear. It was driving me crazy. I passed streets I knew by heart, but which now seemed strange, distorted by the dread that overwhelmed my senses. A group of people chatted on the sidewalk, but everything was like a silent movie. The world around me had shut down, and only urgency guided me. My chest burned and my thoughts scrambled. Fear was a living animal inside me, scratching and biting, trying to break my control. The image of Emily alone in that house, terrified, was the fuel that made me ignore everything, including my own safety. As I turned the corner onto my parents' street, a shiver ran down my spine. The house was in sight, but it seemed different, darker, as if it held a secret. I knew there was no turning back from that moment. I was about to enter something that would change everything. I parked the car abruptly, without even bothering to turn off the engine. The front door of the house was closed, but there were no lights on. The darkness sent a chill down my neck. The absence of any movement made me feel as if the air were trapped within the walls. I called my daughter's name, but my voice sounded small and fragile in the middle of that strange night. No answer. I picked up my phone and tried calling again, but the call went straight to voicemail. It was as if all the sounds in the world had been sucked into a black hole. With each step onto the porch, the wooden floor creaked beneath my feet, the sound deafening in the absolute silence. I grabbed the doorknob and realized it was ice cold. I turned it slowly, hoping it was locked, but it wasn't. The door opened with a sharp click that echoed down the hallway. The smell inside the house was different, heavy, almost metallic. The living room was exactly as usual, but there was something in the atmosphere, as if the air were thicker. My eyes searched for Emily, but the darkness swallowed any form within a few feet of me. My instincts screamed at me to turn on the light, but part of me was afraid of what I would see. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest, and took the first step inside. At that moment, I knew something wasn't right. Something or someone was there with me. I closed the door behind me, the sound of the lock echoing like a warning. My eyes tried to adjust to the dim light, and I moved cautiously, as if each movement might wake something dormant. Then I heard a low, almost imperceptible sound coming from the hallway to the left. It was like a whisper, but so faint it barely seemed real. I tilted my head to listen better, and my heart leaped when I realized it was a voice. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was urgent, almost pleading. The air turned chilly, and goosebumps broke out on my arms. I called out for Emily again, but this time my voice was shaky. The whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by a suffocating silence. It was as if the house itself had held its breath along with me. Everything seemed to conspire to keep me still, paralyzed. I took a few hesitant steps down the hallway, feeling the floor vibrate slightly beneath my feet. As I passed the guest room door, something made me stop. The doorknob was turned downward, as if someone had just released it. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. That's when I heard a dull thud from upstairs, a single impact, as if something had fallen. My heart hammered in my chest, and the urgency to find my daughter mixed with the fear of what else I might find in that house. The sound from upstairs echoed within me like a call impossible to ignore. I glanced up the stairs, and the darkness seemed thicker at the top, as if guarding something it didn't want to see. Each step seemed higher than the last, and my feet felt like lead. I gripped the railing tightly, the wood rough beneath my fingers. The silence was so absolute I could hear my own ragged breathing. With each step, the creak of the wood sounded like a gunshot, betraying my presence to whoever, or whatever, was above. Halfway up, I could already feel a cold sweat running down my back. The upper corridor was beginning to take shape before my eyes, but it still felt like a distant place. My senses were so heightened I could have sworn I felt a cold draft brush against my face. When I reached the last step, I forced myself to stop. I needed to listen. Nothing, just emptiness. I took 2 steps down the hall and saw that Emily's bedroom door was ajar, a faint beam of light leaking through the crack. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. I took a deep breath, stepping closer. I touched the door with my fingertips, and it slowly opened on its own, revealing the interior. What I saw made my entire body freeze. But before I could react, I heard a sound behind me. I turned sharply, and for a split second, I saw something move at the end of the hallway. It wasn't a person, or maybe it was. It was just a dark silhouette, tall, motionless, watching. I blinked, and when I looked again, there was nothing left. The air was freezing, almost impossible to breathe. My instincts screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I remained motionless, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The silence around me didn't help. It was suffocating, as if all sound had been ripped from the world. Even my heart seemed to be beating more quietly. I slowly turned back to Emily's room, noticing the light coming from a lamp on the floor. The bed was rumpled, and there was an open backpack, clothes scattered about, as if someone had left in a hurry. But Emily wasn't there. Her absence was more frightening than any figure. The floor creaked behind me. I whipped around, but again there was nothing. Just the hallway, empty and dark, as if mocking me. My dread was turning to despair, and the feeling that I was being hunted grew stronger. I grabbed my phone and, with trembling hands, turned on the flashlight. The light cut through the darkness, revealing every detail, but also making it clear that the house seemed larger and stranger than I remembered, as if it had somehow changed. The flashlight trembled slightly in my hand, casting shadows that danced across the walls, changing shape with every movement. I walked down the hallway with measured steps, feeling the old carpet muffle the sound, but not enough to hide from myself that I was heading toward the unknown. Every closed door seemed to hide something, and I wasn't sure whether to open it or keep it that way. The air was thick, with a barely perceptible smell of mold mixed with iron, as if time had stopped inside. As I passed the guest room, I noticed the door was ajar enough for a dark crack to appear before me. I tilted the flashlight and saw only the corner of the made bed and a mirror leaning against the wall. But something in the reflection made me stop. It wasn't me. It was as if for a moment, someone was standing in the opposite corner, motionless, watching. I blinked, and the next second there was nothing, just the cold, empty reflection. My body reacted before my mind. I took 2 steps back, feeling as if the mirror was calling me, a silent invitation to take a closer look, but I refused. I turned my attention to the door at the end of the hallway, the one that led to the attic. It was closed, but from there came the sound, a slow drag, as if something heavy was being moved across the rough floor. The sound was irregular, interspersed with long pauses, as if made with intention. With each passing second, I felt I wasn't alone. It wasn't just the natural fear of a dark place. It was a physical certainty, an invisible weight pressing down on my shoulders. My legs wanted to run, but the need to find my daughter was stronger. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it, and in that moment, I needed to believe that, to keep going. When I placed my hand on the attic doorknob, the cold metal nearly burned my skin. I took a deep breath, my throat dry and my heart racing until it hurt. I turned slowly, and the low sound of the locking mechanism echoed through the hallway like a sentence. I pushed the door open, and a cold draft escaped, momentarily extinguishing the light from my flashlight. In the pitch black, I heard footsteps. They weren't mine. They were slow, deliberate, and seemed to be coming closer. I turned on the flashlight again, and its beam revealed the attic, a large space, but nearly empty, except for a few dusty boxes and old furniture covered in yellowed sheets. The floor creaked under my weight, and with each step, the sound mixed with the distant echo of something I couldn't identify. It was as if the air itself was vibrating, charged with an invisible tension. There was no sign of Emily, and that made the place seem even more ominous. My breathing was too loud in the silence, as if it were forbidden to make noise there. I walked to one of the boxes, trying to find any clue, and upon opening it, I smelled old paper and damp wood. Inside were only old family photos, some I'd never seen before. There was one in particular that made me shiver. My daughter, but younger, sitting in the same living room of that house, next to someone I didn't recognize. The weight of that discovery made me feel as if the ground had given way beneath my feet. I picked up the photo and looked at the background, noticing a detail that shouldn't have been there. Behind the curtain, the shadow of a tall figure, partially hidden. I quickly closed the box, as if to consign it to oblivion, but it was too late. The feeling of being watched was back, stronger than ever. Then I heard a creak coming from the attic entrance. The door, which had been open before, was now closed. I ran to it and turned the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it were locked from the inside. Something impossible. My chest tightened, and the air began to feel thin, difficult to draw in. The silence was no longer silence. It was a living pressure, a presence that filled the room. Suddenly, a childish voice echoed very close to my ear, so clear it made my whole body freeze. "Mommy." I turned around on impulse, shining the flashlight everywhere, but there was no one, just emptiness, and shadows that moved as if they had a life of their own. That's when I heard a noise coming from downstairs, a sound I knew all too well, my daughter's crying. The sound of her crying sliced through my defenses like a blade. There was no mistaking it. It was Emily. The urgency in her voice was laced with pure fear, and it made my body react before my mind could question it. I ran to the attic door, banging hard, feeling the echo reverberate off the walls. Each blow seemed more futile than the last, as if the wood were thicker than it actually was. The crying continued, coming from somewhere below me, as if beckoning me to come down. Suddenly, the door gave way on its own, without me having to use enough force. It opened slowly, creaking almost theatrically, as if something outside was waiting. I hurried down the steps, the sound of my breathing mixing with the creaking of the floorboards, creating a hurried, irregular rhythm. With each step, the crying seemed to change in intensity, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, as if guiding me in a cruel game. Reaching the second-floor hallway, I noticed the house was darker than before, as if the shadows had multiplied. The air was colder, almost freezing, and it made my skin crawl. I followed the sound down the main stairs and smelled faint smoke, something burning somewhere in the distance. But there was no sign of fire. The feeling of walking into a trap only grew. When I reached the living room, the crying stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was so sudden it made my ears ring. I looked around and realized something had changed. The furniture was in different positions, as if someone had moved it quickly. The clock on the wall was stopped, its hand frozen at 2:17. It was as if time had been ripped from its place. My instincts screamed at me to get out of there, but my reason held me back. Emily was somewhere, and I couldn't abandon her. I took a deep breath and called her name again, my voice echoing through the void. It was then that I heard footsteps running upstairs, but this time, they were too heavy to be a child's. I gripped the flashlight tighter and decided to go back upstairs. The sound was coming from my parents' bedroom, a door I hadn't opened in years. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step measured, trying not to make a sound, though the creaking wood made it impossible to be discreet. The door to my parents' room was closed, but a faint light leaked from beneath it, as if someone were inside. A yellowish, flickering light, like that of a candle. It didn't make sense. My parents never left candles lit, and I couldn't recall seeing anything like it in that house in years. I stood in front of the door for a few seconds, listening. The sound coming from inside wasn't footsteps anymore, but something scraping across the floor, a repetitive, rhythmic sound, as if someone were moving a heavy object back and forth. I grabbed the handle and felt that sharp, almost painful cold again. I wasn't sure I was ready to open it, but I couldn't back out either. I turned slowly, and the door opened by itself, revealing the dimly lit room. The curtains were closed, but the fabric rippled slightly as if an invisible wind were blowing through. In the center of the room, an antique chair faced the wall, and on it, something that looked like a dress. But it wasn't just that. There was a figure inside, sitting motionless, as if waiting for me. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I took a step inside, and the floor seemed to sink beneath my feet. A long, low creak. The figure in the chair didn't move, but I felt a heavy gaze, even without seeing the face. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, each one seemingly stretching toward me. The temperature dropped even further, and my teeth began to chatter involuntarily. It was then that a whisper tore through the silence, coming from within that figure. "You're late." My skin crawled from head to toe, and the urge to run was almost irresistible. But before I could react, something behind me slammed the door shut, locking me inside. The candle went out, and in the darkness, I heard Emily's crying again, but this time, it came from inside her own room. In the pitch black, my instinct was to raise the flashlight. When the beam cut through the darkness, it revealed only the chair, now empty. The dress lay on the floor, as if no one had ever worn it. My heart felt like it wanted to burst from my chest, and my breathing was so rapid it hurt. Emily's cries echoed faintly, coming from some indefinable point in the room, as if she were both near and far away. I took a cautious step, shining a light into every corner, until I noticed a small door, almost hidden behind a heavy cabinet. The ancient wood was cracked, and the lock looked as if it had been forced long ago. As I approached, I noticed the crying intensifying, making it impossible to ignore. I felt an almost animal urge to knock down the cabinet and make my way inside, even without knowing what I would find. I pushed hard against the furniture, but it seemed stuck to the floor, as if resisting my efforts. With every inch I managed to move, the crying changed in tone, becoming something hoarse, almost a moan. The walls seemed to vibrate with the sound, and it made me want to finish quickly, before my courage evaporated. Finally, I managed to clear enough space to reach the doorknob. As I turned it, a chilly wind escaped, brushing against my face like invisible hands. The small door creaked open, revealing a narrow corridor made of ancient planks, plunged into total darkness. The air inside was colder and heavier, and the smell of damp earth and rust made me choke. The crying now came from within that tunnel. For a second, I considered turning back, but if Emily was there was no way I could back out. I clutched the flashlight to my chest, took a deep breath, and took the first step inside, feeling the uneven floor beneath my feet. The darkness felt alive, as if it would swallow me with each step. The corridor was so narrow that my shoulders nearly touched the walls. Each step was accompanied by sharp creaks, as if the wood was protesting my presence. The sound of crying guided me, but also confused me, changing direction as if projected from multiple points. The flashlight illuminated only a meter ahead, and everything beyond seemed to dissolve into darkness. It was like walking inside a bad dream from which I couldn't wake. As I walked forward, I noticed marks on the walls, deep scratches, as if human nails had tried to rip through the wood. I ran my fingers over one of them and felt a strange roughness, as if I were touching something more than just wood. It made my stomach churn. I continued, but with the feeling that I was approaching something I shouldn't have encountered. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, slow, and clearly not mine. I turned quickly, illuminating the path I had taken, but there was nothing, just the empty, motionless corridor. When I turned back to the front, I realized the distance to the exit had increased, as if the tunnel were longer now. My heart began to beat faster, and the pressure in the air increased, making it difficult to breathe. Emily's cries turned into words, low and repetitive. "Don't look. Don't look." It made every muscle in my body tense. With each repetition, the voice grew closer, until it seemed to be whispering in my ear. I swung the flashlight sharply to the side and, for an instant, saw something move in the darkness. A slender shape, too tall to be human. I ran the last few feet, stumbling on the uneven floor, until I found another door at the end of the hallway. The handle was cold, almost frozen, but it yielded to my touch. I pushed and entered, not thinking about what might be on the other side, only with the desperate hope of finding my daughter. As I walked through the door, I realized I was in a place I knew very well, but at the same time, it felt completely different. Upon entering, I immediately recognized the place. It was my parents' living room. But something was off. The furniture wasn't arranged the same way, and the colors seemed faded, almost as if I were looking at an old photograph. The air smelled sweet and cloying, mixed with the scent of old wood. A chill ran down my spine. In the center of the room was a rug I hadn't remembered existed. It was dark red, stained in several places, as if it had absorbed something that didn't want to be seen. I approached it slowly, the flashlight's light flickering. The silence was so profound that even the sound of my heart seemed to echo off the walls. Suddenly, a low chuckle broke the silence, coming from some dark corner. It wasn't Emily's laugh, but something deeper, almost mocking. I turned toward the sound, but there was nothing there, just shadows, motionless, as if watching me. The feeling of being watched was suffocating. In the corner, near the fireplace, I saw a small object, Emily's bracelet. I quickly picked it up, feeling a lump in my throat. This meant she'd been there, perhaps still nearby. The weight of uncertainty tightened my chest, but it also gave me a reason to keep going. It was then that I heard a sound coming from the hallway to my left. Light footsteps, like those of a barefoot child. I followed carefully, my flashlight casting a faint path ahead. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered. At the end of it, a half-open door let out a bluish light. Something told me Emily was there, but also that I wasn't alone. I pushed the door open slowly, and the blue light revealed a completely empty room except for a chair in the center. Emily sat on it, her eyes fixed on me, but something was off. She didn't blink, she didn't move, and her skin was incredibly pale. A shiver ran through me. I ran to her, kneeling down to hold her hands. They were cold, almost icy. "Emily, it's me, Mommy," I whispered, but she didn't answer. She just turned her head slightly, looking over my shoulder. My heart froze. I turned slowly to see what was behind me. The darkness seemed to condense into a tall, faceless human form. The presence was so overwhelming that my legs went weak. Instinctively, I pulled Emily toward me, trying to pull her away from the thing. The figure didn't move, just watched, as if waiting for something. The flashlight flickered, and for a moment the figure was closer. I could feel the air around her heavy, as if sucking all the oxygen from the room. I held my daughter tighter, promising myself I wouldn't let go of her for anything. With the last of my strength, I got up and ran for the door. Behind me, I heard slow but steady footsteps following me. I knew I didn't have much time before it caught up with us. I crossed the hall with Emily in my arms. Without looking back, I nearly stumbled down the stairs, feeling every beat of my heart, as if it were a warning that we were out of time. The house felt different now, darker, narrower, as if trying to keep us from leaving. The air was thick, difficult to breathe, and Emily remained completely silent, her face hidden in my shoulder. All I could think about was reaching the front door. When I saw it, a momentary relief washed over me, but I soon realized it was locked with a lock I hadn't remembered existed. My hands trembled as I tried to turn it, but the metal was cold and hard, as if glued shut. Behind me, I heard those slow footsteps, getting closer by the second. I didn't need to look to know we weren't alone. I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering all my remaining strength. With a push, I pushed the door open with my shoulder, feeling the wood give way under the pressure. The dim light from the street flooded the room, cutting through the darkness like a knife. I ran outside, feeling the cold dawn air burn my lungs, but I kept going. I knew we were only safe if we were far from that house. When I finally reached the car, I placed Emily in the passenger seat and turned the key with trembling hands. I glanced in the rearview mirror and, for a moment, saw the figure standing in the doorway, motionless, just watching. My eyes fixed on her until the darkness swallowed her completely. I put the car in gear and sped off without looking back. We drove in silence for a few minutes until Emily, her voice weak, said, "She's still there, and she knows where we live." Her words stuck in my mind like a brand, and I realized this wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. If you've made it this far, please share this story so more people know what happened. Subscribe to the channel, send it to your friends on WhatsApp, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read them all with great care, and I want to know if you've also experienced something you've never been able to explain.